Last video I shared about using a no-till drill to establish food plots. Here we are coming into the fall food plot season. But even here at the Proving Grounds, we got food plots we can't get a tractor to. And I know when Trace and I first started, of course, we didn't have the resources to get a no-till drill or a tractor. And Trace and I planted a lot of acres, broadcasting seed. Broadcasting or using hand tools is still a very valid way to establish food plots. Right off the bat, the most important thing when broadcasting seed is to make sure the seed's gonna get contact with the soil. If it gets on top of, leaf duff this deep or a bunch of dead vegetation, that plant's probably gonna starve to death before it gets really good root contact with the soil. It's gonna dry out, desiccate, and die. So right off the bat, when you're making your plans to broadcast, come up with a way to make sure we're getting good seed to soil contact. One of the ways I like to do that is prescribe fire. Now, if it's a brand new plot, maybe I'm cutting some brush out in the middle of the timber or something like that, I can take a backpack blower or a leaf rake, just pull all the leaves and sticks and debris out of the way and expose the soil. But if you've grown a crop there in the past, it's been a hidey-ho food plot in the same place for 3 or 4 years, probably got some vegetation, either your summer crop or weeds growing there. You have to find a way to get some of that out of the way so most of the seeds have a good chance of landing or making contact with the soil. And we've learned that just by taking our steel backpack blower, getting in timber a little bit, or that big weed whacker if we're in a grassy area, and removing the duff on the outside of that plot, maybe back a few yards away from the edge of the plot, and using prescribed fire. Now we're talking about usually a 1/4 acre or less, so it's a real safe fire under appropriate conditions, of course. And a fire will do a couple things. It will expose the soil and rapidly turn that duff or vegetation into fertilizer, which is a great way to get that plot started quickly. One negative of using fire, of course, you're gonna turn the top of the soil black with that duff. And if you're a guy working 8 to 5 and you're out there on a Saturday and you burn it off and spread seed on that really hot black surface and it doesn't rain for a week, that soil could get to 130, 140 degrees with the sun shining on it, just like a black pickup truck, and you could desiccate or kill the seed. So when you're broadcasting, I think rule number 1, make sure you're getting seed to soil contact. Rule number 2, it is best if the seed hit the ground and 3 minutes later a raindrop hits the seed. That doesn't happen very often, but the closer to a rain event you can spread the seed, the better chances you'll get a good stand of that crop. If you can't do all that, fire's not allowed in your area, you're on your granny's back 40 and she says no fire, you need to do something to take care of the weeds there, because that brand new 1/4 inch tall plant, if it does germinate, can compete with a 1 foot tall ragweed or something else blocking all the sun. If there's 1 or 2 weeds in there, a handful, it's not a big deal. If it's covered with weeds, you gotta have some way to get that off the area for the new seedlings to get sunshine so they can photosynthesize and grow. If what's growing in the plot is mainly broadleaf weeds, annual plants, you can broadcast and then weed eat as close to the ground as you can. Note that I said broadcast first. If you lay all that duff on the ground, it's really tough for that seed to get access to the soil. So you're gonna broadcast the seed and then just weed whip it as close to the ground as you can. When you're weed whipping, try to use long, smooth strokes. If you're just going back and forth, you leave big clumps there, those seeds won't grow through that green, wet, moist, heavy vegetation. So you must spread the duff out evenly as possible. I don't like raking everything off except dry leaves, because you're gonna end up pulling a bunch of dirt off there. And remember, topsoil, or that top layer, is the most nutritious, best part of the soil, and we don't want to displace that off of our food plot area.
Growing Deer is brought to you by Bass Pro Shops and Cabela's. Also by Green Cover Food Plots, Winchester, PH Outdoors, Moultrie Mobile, Steel, Fleet Outdoor Apparel, Morel Targets, Fourth Arrow, Scorpion Venom Archery, Case IH Tractors, Burris Optics, G5 Broadheads, Prime Bows, and Redneck Hunting Blinds.
Once we've prepared a seed bed, or we know what we're going to do to ensure the seed have access to the soil, we're broadcasting right before rain, we want to think again about what we're planting. It could be as simple as just cereal rye, but I always prefer blends that do do a couple things. Something that's really attractive early, medium, and late season. Probably got some strong annual clovers in there that will come on in the spring. Makes an awesome strut area for turkeys. Clovers, of course, hold a lot of insects. Turkeys love insects. Hen's gonna be feeding there, Tom's gonna be strutting there. I like a blend for many reasons, and you're getting more tonnage out of a blend. A big problem with the little hidey-ho food plot, if there's a lot of deer in the area, they can consume all the forage before the end of season. So having a good quality blend with something that's palatable early, mid, and late season will make that a more viable hunting location for many more weeks. Now that we've discussed how to prepare and plant a hidey-ho, let's talk about its mission. Probably should have done that first. A hidey-ho food plot, in my mind, is something to attract deer, basically create a pinch point, oftentimes in the middle of large wooded areas or areas that there are not naturally occurring bottlenecks or pinch points. So you've got 100 acres of timber and you've got the only green, lush vegetation that's palatable to deer right in the middle. The deer are gonna bottleneck down and check that out. Even when there's acorns on the ground, they tend to like a bit of forage with that. So a well-placed and productive hidey-ho food plot is a fabulous hunting location. Here at the Proving Grounds, which is not ag country, hills and hollers and timber, we have harvested a disproportionate amount of mature bucks off hidey-hos. Maybe you are in ag country and you've talked to farmer, and this is really common, and leaving the back corner of a field standing, the deer probably ate all the beans or the forage out there anyway, and he's not planting a cover crop or a fall crop or not harvesting those beans in that back corner. That can become a hidey-ho or even a destination food plot, depending on the acres of the corner, and you can broadcast right over that. The farmers probably use herbicides, there's probably not many weeds out there, and if they're standing beans, they're not going to be this tall on you most likely. You can walk right through there at the broadcaster, spread seed over the beans, let them fall to the soil, and get a pretty doggone good stand. So broadcasting works really well in that ag country where farmers have kept their crops pretty weed-free. Now it's much more difficult in corn, obviously much taller, and you're going to have to walk about every third row because farmers tend to plant corn so close together, you're not getting good seed dispersal anymore. But it can be done. You got to wait for that corn to be turning yellow to make sure there's enough sun getting to the ground, and you're walking down that row spreading seed right before rain again, getting that moisture down there and some sunshine so it will germinate and grow. If you're really fancy and kind of on the cutting edge of stuff, a lot of farmers anymore are using the big drones, the ag drones, to spread seed over the top of standing corn, and those rotors are pushing so hard and so close to the seed source, they help push that seed through the corn down to the ground. Hidey-hos are designed to attract a lot of deer. Let's think about that. Hidey-hos are designed to attract a lot of deer to a relatively small area, 40 yards by 40 yards or so. You gotta have a lot of seed, so if the seeding rate, just for illustration, is 10 pounds per acre, that's for the crop to get mature, but deer are in there browsing all the time, so don't be afraid to double that seeding rate in a hidey-ho food plot location. It's doubtful, if there's many deer in the area at all, that a lot of those plants are gonna reach maturity. So you have a lot of seed to cover the ground, A, to produce a lot of forage, and B, to keep weeds suppressed. We plant our hidey-ho food plots at a very high rate, and we use a planting technique that assures we don't have gaps. We have usually 2 guys. You can do it by yourself. I've done it by myself a bunch of times. And you put half the amount of seed in the seed hopper, the bag you got over the shoulder, and so okay, I'm gonna plant 50 pounds of seed in here. I'm gonna put 25 pounds in there, and I'm gonna go north and south, and I put the other 25 pounds in and go east and west. That way I get really good coverage. Don't try to plant it all in one pass, because if you do, inevitably there'll be some skips out there, which means less forage, less attraction for deer, and likely weeds in your plot. With all this said, when should you prepare the plot? You don't want to do it too early, you get weeds in there before you plant. And when should you plant? Well, we know we want to plant, especially in the broadcast system, right before a rain, but defining that a bit more, 45 to 60 days before the first average frost date in your area. And because the weather's so crazy anymore, I take that to the average first frost date during the last 5 years. You can find this on websites throughout the whitetails range. You can find it for your area no matter where you are. So 45 to 60 days before the first anticipated frost or the average frost date during the past 5 years and just before rain is ideal planting time. If you know there's a heck of a lot of browse pressure where you're hunting, you may not want to plant 45 to 60 days ahead because the deer could consume it all. It comes up, it germinates, it gets 3 inches tall, and they come in there and whack it down to the ground. If that's the case where you are, A, you need to get that prime out closet and harvest a lot of does. And B, you got to plant closer to when you want to hunt or to be brown and leaves by the time you get there. Or do what we do in some of our little areas where our hide-os get hit hard. Plant your crop, let it get established, get deer conditioned to feeding there, and then come back in with cereal rye. It's a relatively cheap, small grain. It's not as palatable as the other small grains, but if you got that kind of browse pressure, you want something tough and durable, not maximum palatability, and seed that area where they browsed and allowed some sunlight to get to the soil heavily with cereal rye. So you've planted on time, you got that crop working, you've got deer conditioned to feeding there, you can easily add more tonnage by overseeding that if there's sun getting to the soil with cereal rye closer to or even during season. I really like planting hide-hos, maybe even more than the bigger food plots. I love that too, getting that tractor, hooking up the drill. But hide-hos are boots on the ground. You're very involved. It's a very personal relationship with the crop, whether it grows or doesn't grow. So a couple tips. I still put utilization cages in hide-hos even though they're small. That just lets me know how much browse pressure is in the area. That's not only good for me as a food plot farmer, but as a hunter. You know, it's 1.5 feet tall inside the cage and not very tall outside. There's a lot of deer in the area, and I need to be spending some time hunting that plot. You can follow along this fall. We're gonna be planting, preparing, planting, and hunting our hide-hos. And I bet if you follow along, you'll learn from some of the mistakes we made or to some of the successes we share that may help you be a better hide-ho food plot farmer. Learning better techniques to produce food plots is important to a hunter, but more important and to everyone on this planet is God's will for our life and understanding the gift of His Son. And we learn that through visiting with others and even more importantly, getting in His Word, the Bible, and seeking it, being intentional about it, and applying His will to our life. Thanks for watching Growing Deer.